Good morning. This is the weekly VOLTHA TST meeting. Let's see, today's August 22nd. Right, so just get caught up on a few things. So the running announcement is the broadband meetup being hosted by Turk Telecom over in Istanbul, Turkey in October. If you plan on attending, fill out the RSVP, and there's some topics open for technical talks. If anybody would like to add anything, you can contact Denise about it. Let me see. And somebody brought up there was an article recently that ONF was mentioned in that the Turkish government is backing open source initiatives. So that was good to see. Okay, so I guess we can dive right into it. So for testing, the Jenkins jobs, the very important pipeline view and all that fun stuff, fixes and testing have been ongoing. It looks like a lot of people have been working on it. I noticed this morning we seem to have accumulated quite a bit of unstable status. I don't know where that came from, but I'll go poke around at that later today. Well, the BBSIM tests, Jan and the BISDN folks will be looking at the community jobs. So just a couple of side notes. We have a lot of tickets in Jira right now. They're tracking the BBSIM failures. I found a small problem. So Jira has a JQL query language that you can look up tickets based on attributes, like what labels they have, attributes they have attached to them, or the text of the problem description, things like that. Jira has the concept of tickets and then sub-tickets. So like you could create an epic with tickets and attach a bunch of sub-tickets to it. One case we use them in is with BBSIM test failures. We have a top-level ticket that's the BBSIM failures general, and then we create sub-tickets for the individual failures. JQL doesn't have a direct way to query for sub-tickets from what I've seen. So in order to make nice little URLs that people can click on and just see all of the test failures or different tickets that are open for jobs, we're going to have to write a little bit more beefy query to be able to look up all of the tickets plus the sub-tickets, but we can only get at top level ones right now. But that's not a big deal because we can track them in Confluence. Okay, so I guess next is Jan, if you have an update for the community test pods, and Barak was working on trying to generate a binary for the edge core devices. If Jan's on.
Yeah, sure. So Burak and I had a small debugging session, looking at the edge core and trying to get some output and seeing how it's failing with different thingies. So we tried this VOLTHA binary, but after looking at some of the outputs, we agreed that it's probably not the binary. It's more like a lot of other things around that. So the current next steps would be that's also mentioned in the ticket directly related to that. So I forgot the ticket number. I'll find it out in a moment. So we will probably try to update the firmware of the CPLD and stuff like that to see if that solves anything, because we tried all the other stuff of like rebooting and the typical things. Have you tried turning it off and on again stuff? And yeah, then
1598, by the way.
Come again?
What was
1598.
1598, yeah.
1598.
All right.
It's the ticket number, yeah. So we'll try to update the firmware. I think the last thing that Burak wrote there is also, let's give it one spin. If it breaks, it's not more broken than it is right now. And then we definitely know that yeah, it's still broken, so we need to move on with our lives. So if anybody has any better ideas what to do on those edge core boxes, I wrote to another colleague from university that has been working with those boxes, because at least he says that he got one of them working. So maybe something will come out of that. I don't know yet. But for now, they don't seem to be working. We'll update the firmware, and maybe that helps. At least for this short-term goal that is from the next point here that we wrote down, where we tried to get Edgecore to working. And yeah, I mean, Burak, maybe you have some things to add here.
Yeah, actually, thank you. As I wrote in the ticket, so we just saw both problems that are seen on XGS and GPON. They are separate problems, and there are two possibilities for the GPON box that I wrote also in the ticket. So the firmware versions are quite old for this revision that this box has. This is our 0A box, which is the first line of production boxes. So these boxes can have some PCIe chipset problems, that can cause race conditions accessing the pawn chips. So the firmware update can save this state, can save this box from this state, or it cannot. So if it cannot, it should put into an RMA procedure. So we also had this, experienced this before. So yeah, I was trying to get the latest firmware versions that can be installable on this box. So if we can learn that, so we can install them on this box and see whether they are good or not. Yeah.
Burak, one question. So those are the, I believe, very same boxes that we were testing 10 months ago. So I'm not sure the firmware updates will help us. If
Yeah,
that's
actually, Girish told us, and also Mahir told us that the Girish, sometimes these boxes got out of from this state. This box got out of from this state by power cycling. So after some while, this box can get into such a state, so it cannot get out of that state. Okay, so we also
even with the reboot, right?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Soft reboot definitely will not
Sure.
work. But even with power cycle, we may not get out of this state. But on XGS side, it's a milder problem, as I wrote again in the ticket. So there may be also a PCIe chipset problem on that box, but we usually get out of this state by power cycling.
So can we find the firmware from where? What is the plan for that?
I think we can find, yes.
Okay.
I'm just trying to spot the right version. Actually, we have several versions, but I just try to spot the correct versions for this specific revision.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you find it, just ping me. We can, I mean,
Yeah,
I can
sure.
also be in the lab, and then we can see how that whole thing goes. Because maybe for stuff like that, it's actually good to be on site. But yeah, I think like that's a good thing. We can try to upgrade and then see, maybe it helps. Hopefully it helps.
So I'm digging through some old emails, and so from an email from a year and a half ago, and a thread about EdgeCore boxes, it kind of is becoming, it's reminding me that I think Stortus was committed to supporting that hardware in Germany for a period of 3 years.
Oh,
I wonder if that window has expired, but I'm wondering, Jan or Brock, if either of you have contacts at Stortis and if it would be worth exploring.
I have wonderful contacts to Stortis. I can call them right now.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, Stortis hired all of the EdgeCore folks that left, right? So half of Stortis is basically ex-EdgeCore employees.
Right.
So I can definitely try to call them and ask them. I didn't know that they were involved at all in this part, but yeah, sure, that's a good idea actually.
Yeah, so I think that would be good. And I don't know, I'll look if this thread is useful, I'll forward it. I can't quite tell yet. But yeah, okay, good. I have no more to add just yet.
It's a D instead of a T, the second part, if you ask for a spelling. Store this.
Okay.
Yes. So yeah, if you find that email and like, or just let me know like who was the contact that stored this, then maybe I can point them into the right direction of where this obligation comes from.
Yeah, well, Manuel Paul was the source of the email at DT. I don't have a Stortis name in this thread.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll call them and see if we find something.
So the main guy at Stortis is Alex Jeffries, though. So perhaps he would know about
Alex is not working at Stortis anymore.
Oh, okay.
Alex sold his shares. So the CEO is Valdemar Šek. That's also the guy that I would call. And Alex has his own company with a bit of a different focus, more like towards Tofino and stuff.
Were there any other updates, or were we just covering the short term this week?
We can do the midterm part at least. Like so I met a bunch of guys from Zyxel on Wednesday on the first follow up to our TST. I talked to them about the current status and how involved they want to be and all this kind of things. So one thing that they told me is that the last thing that they really qualified with their Zyxel boxes is the 2.10 release, and they sent me all of the documentation that they have. So basically how they test it and all of those things with VOLTHA 2.10. And they also told me that I should probably, when I want to start debugging, I should start debugging with VOLTHA 2.10 and their box and then see if this is working, because that should be working with all of the things. They like sent me a bunch of access thingies and binaries to install on the Zyxel OLT. So I'll try to go down this path. And on the side of maybe getting a bit more involved or doing maybe like somehow finding a way to providing an additional OLT, they seem interested, but there's more political talk to do there. Obviously, that's not necessarily my field of expertise. So but I'll definitely have a contact there now for doing the technical debugging part and getting the Zyxel box into the right state, which was tested by them as well. If I understood correctly, they only tested in their lab, so there was never like a qualifying test job in the community lab, but it should work, I guess, if we do the same thing. So yeah, that's the parallel thing to work on, I guess. And then for the political side, I don't know, like how exactly that whole thing goes. Who's talking to whom there?
So in theory, it should work with the latest agent. It's just a wheel issue. Is that correct, Brock? You know better than me.
Sorry, I was muted. So we are talking about Network X demo?
No. Zyxel OLT. they verified their OLT boxes can run with the 2.10 release, but I was saying that in theory they should work with the latest agents, right? It is just a build issue.
Yeah, actually, when we check the master branch, we see that with Jan also we just checked the versions. So we have 380 on master branch. So the latest I think with 210 is 374. And I need to check the difference between 380 and 374 in terms of, there are some Zyxel related, combo related commits on the branch. So I cannot promise, or I don't know if the latest will work, because there are some SFP related, dynamic SFP related changes. So we can see.
And in specifically that regard, we should definitely check the documentation, because that's something where I stumbled over initially, because the documentation says that if you want to run VOLTHA 2.11 or 2.12, you should use OpenOLT in the version 4 dot something, and that seems to be a typo or something. I don't know, because I don't think that exists.
Yeah, I brought that into Mahir's attention actually, and Mahir actually redirected me to Joy, but I just I was so busy to bring you to your attention, Joy, because on the documentation really there is a table, there's a matrix, on the release, and we have an open OLT agent version just same as that of OpenLT adapter. So that may be a typo, because the latest version we have is 380, and currently we are moving to 390 as far as I can see from the latest. Yeah.
I got to go back and check. I think that typo is actually in 210 as well. It's been carried forward. Yeah, I'll fix that for the release.
Thank you.
Yep. Or if you notice typo problems in the release documentation, feel free to edit them if you'd like to have a stab at it.
Yeah, that was my initial idea. But so currently I'm thinking let's try to see what actually works. So I'll start from 210 here for the Zyxel part. Because at least as far as I see, the documentation that we have seems to fit from the versioning to what Zyxel has in their documentation of what they qualified. And then we can try to see what actually works for 2.11. Maybe we just put in the same version as 2.10, because 2.10 says, I think, 3.7.2. And then we can check for 2.12 as well and just see what works, right? I mean, there is nobody really keeping us from updating those versions, I guess, unless there has been any. Has there been publications about this? Like, I don't know, test results of VOLTHA 2.11 now also available with Zyxel OLTs, or any blog posts or anything we would find like test results or anything where we'd find the versions that have been used there?
Was that question for me?
I don't know. Like basically to the whole TST. I mean, like if anybody knows like how the version 2.11 was cut there, or how the qualification works, so maybe some vendors were involved. Like, because I mean, this OpenOLT adapter is the one for all of the different vendors, right? So that's one version that should be installed on either EdgeCore or Zyxel, or any other OLT vendors that support OpenOLT. So maybe even the Radisys boxes there. So I would assume that during the release, somebody must have written down something of like, this is the OpenOLT version that we used on those different boxes. And then we can just put this version, right? Because then this has been tested. And then for 212, obviously, we still need to figure out. But if we would have a point to start for 211, that would be good.
Well, for the 211 release, that's the first release that we cut after the old staff had departed. And let me see. I think we had a stale version of the open OLT adapter for 211, in part because we're having to build it now. So per device, we probably have not documented that.
Okay, then I guess we just like try it, and then
yeah.
If it works with like I mean, like I looked a bit through the release notes, and I think it should probably be okay. At least there's no changes that I saw that are super big, but yeah, let's see. I'll try to work a bit on the Zyxel box in parallel to the EdgeCore stuff, and then hopefully next week I can report some more details of which versions, how to plug it together. Yeah.
One thing to be careful of, there are actually 2 OpenOLT repositories in both Garrett and GitHub. Just be careful of the one that you're working with.
What does that mean?
I don't know the rationale behind it, but we have 2 repositories called OpenOLT. The ones with the later check-ins, that's the active one. I can go dig the URL up for it if you want.
Okay, I'll look at them and see if I can spot the difference.
Okay.
There might be a learning here that if we've not documented the specific test scenario for various devices in each release, and if it were reasonably easy for us to capture that, that would make a lot of sense. In the ONF marketplace, we certify devices. I'm observing that the ones where vendors have self-certified, which is something that we added about a year ago, a test report is required, and I see a test report for the Samba OLT, but I don't see test reports or configurations for any of the devices that were in the CI/CD pipeline. So, a thought: how hard would it be for us to capture the configurations, say in this 2.12 release, and get if we capture them, we can publish them. That's the easy part.
So we have a lot of output from the pipelines, and all the needed information should be somewhere in the output or the input in terms of variables, but like both sides basically. I think the big work part here would be to figure out what of those things we actually need. So, but that's an interesting task. So, I mean, while I'll be looking at the Zyxel stuff, I'll be looking at their test report that they sent me. So I need to compare either way to how our pipelines look. So maybe I can, while doing that, see if I can script something easy to like parse what we have as pipeline outputs into some kind of test report output. Let's see. Not promising anything for the next week, but I'll try to see how that works with each other. And I think the idea is really good, because then we're at least upholding our own standards of like other people need to bring their test reports, so we bring our own. That's good. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, very good. And if it can be scripted, great. But even if it's just a table with version numbers of components or whatnot, those things, anything additional would be helpful, I would think.
I'm just checking something quick. Okay. So are we all good on the community testing pipelines, or do we have anything else to cover?
Yeah, I think like the long-term part is really like this open question still from my side. Like who's the like and how does this political part work now with like Zyxel saying, we're interested in general of like maybe getting a bit more involved, and then like is there like I mean Telecom said that, or Dutch Telecom said that they might be interested in like maybe also buying equipment or a support contract, or like how does that work now? Because I feel a bit like an imposter here of like connecting all the things.
Yeah, well, you're far from an imposter. You're kind of in the right spot. Who from Deutsche Telekom expressed that interest?
Of buying stuff. So Manuel Paul said that it might be possible to replace some parts, and he might be able to find some budget here and there. So I had a meeting with him and Björn, talking a bit about how to develop the lab and maybe improve certain parts. But we also had this discussion of like it's hard for me right now. It's still hard to understand who's responsible for what. So like it's kind of obvious that DT provides the infrastructure around it, and they bought the hardware, I assume, for some things. So I don't know who owns what exactly. And then I guess the question comes again when we want to add OLT. So who buys the hardware? Who buys the support contracts? Or is it just a typical donation? Or like I don't know. This is I guess the question here.
Yeah, so I mean, historically, the majority of the equipment has been donated by vendors, and it is possible. I'm not directly aware that maybe some components were purchased, but I think that the secret to really making all this work is the operator interest and pull through, and that's really what tends to bring the vendors level of interest and brings them to the table and whatnot. And so starting with Manuel and Bjorn is the right place to start. And and that engagement with Zyxel is what gets things moving, and the operators really do need to sort of step up to help, either working directly with the vendors or doing some purchasing on their own or whatnot to make sure that the vendors and the components that they care about most are in the testing labs. So that's the big picture. Specifically here, I think that I think DT has an interest in making this work, and we should just try to define a next step. And I think getting some more Zyxel hardware may make a lot of sense. I think that I expressed last week, I think we should be looking at end-of-lifing the edge core hardware, although I heard Turk Telecom has an interest. I heard that from the Netsia guys last time, I think. But we're just having a lot of trouble with the edge core hardware. We're not getting support. We're seeing the hardware atrophy and fail. And there's only so much we can do if the vendor won't back the gear. I don't think we can continue to invest in the gear. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess if you're fine with that, I can try to like keep these discussions going. I can have a meeting with maybe like the people from Zyxel and the people from DT and see how they want to do certain parts. And I just don't want to overstep any boundaries here in organizing stuff that other people are usually organizing. I think the direction of seeing if we can get vendors involved is very good. So like also going into the direction of Radisys here. So if we can get any OLT hardware here shipped to Berlin, I would love to see how I can support that with like putting it into the rack or talking to the DT people of how to do that or where to connect it. I mean, I'm basically working just around the corner and am there regularly. So that should be, the on-site part should be easy. So yeah, it's just I want to like sync up with you guys of like what the useful next steps here are, or who wants to participate.
Yeah. Well, so I would just say that you're not overstepping and you're kind of in the right spot, and being there physically, it's one of the reasons we really wanted to resource some local people in Berlin because I think it does make a lot of this easier there. So I think you should feel that you have the license to explore this further with DT and with Zyxel. I think Amit, I don't see on the call today.
Hi, Tim. I'm Abhilash here, so I can speak a bit on the Radisys VOLTHA. I just wanted to speak a bit, but I didn't want to interrupt you guys. So I have put forward the request for the ROLT so that it can be shipped to the Berlin office and have it set up there. I just have to get some approvals, it's a bit more political. So I'll just update and also I'll sync up with Manuel and beyond. I'm definitely sure they would not say no for that. I'll just update on the findings are and what the developments are on the ROLT. Actually, it would be easier for having ROLT because anyway, our team will be there to support. And also, we are already running the community version in the ROLT, the latest one here in our Bangalore lab.
Yeah.
So
I think
there's nothing much effort to be done there with respect to the build environments and all. It should be straightforward. So I'll just update. I'll keep you guys updated on that.
Cool.
Okay, very good. And then with we did look at the inventory that we have in Hillsborough at the lab that's being hosted by Radisys for the VOLTHA lab. From memory, I think it has 7 OLTs, but I think 3 or 4 of those were EdgeCore, and then I think it has 2 or 3 Radisys OLTs, and it has one that's kind of labeled unknown, and the presumption is that it's a Zyxel, but we might have to get eyes on it to determine if that's the case. And so Amit was on that thread, and I guess there's a question about what to do with that hardware as well.
Okay. Tim, can you loop me in that mail thread? I'll just. I'm not part of that mail thread. If there is any going on, I'll just check with the concerned folks there in Hillsborough office.
That sounds good. I will do that. All right, I believe I've sent you that email thread. You should have a copy.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so good. I think we're on a path to get some additional hardware in there. And Jan, yeah, please, just let's continue to communicate, and we'll continue to help as we can as well.
Cool.
Okay, let's see. The next item up was just some updates from the BBSIM, the simulator testing. There is a ticket that's tracking a lot of the bulk failures from VBSIM. If anybody wants to work on any of them, feel free. Just a couple of items to mention. We had a failure in the VOLTHA test, periodic VOLTHA test BBSIM that Mahir found. This was kind of strange because all of the tests run by the pipeline, or at least the tests that were invoked, seemed to all pass, but overall the job failed or showed unstable. So I don't know if we've got another silent failure going on, but I'm working on debugging that one. Let me see. The verified BBSIM unit test yeah, instability, the unstable jobs, quite a bit of it has cleared up. Can't talk today. Let's see. From the history, from the job history, there's only 2 lingering failures right now. We used to have a lot of yellow in here. We had a failure on the 14th and the 17th. And this one is also kind of odd. Was this the one? No. Oh, this is easier. Oh. This is the only thing that looks like a test, like a failure message, but it's not actually saying error in here aside from test case failure, but it's not actually failing outright. But that's another failure to look at. Let me see. We had a failure. This is affecting the entire periodic VOLTHA DT. Got to fix that typo. BB Sim master. So there's a failure that's showing up. It's a permission problem in tilde volt CTL config. All of the test runs are failing with this. First need to track down what node this is showing up on. I think this failure is actually a downstream manifestation. I suspect the volt CTL command is trying to create the config file when it runs on a clean system for the first time, and we either have a UMask problem or a permissions problem, and the file's getting into a bad state, but that needs to be tracked down. And we had another batch of failures in the BBSim sanity test failure that's showing up with no match for blah, 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 BBSim device. In added flow count for oil TT also was failing. You see, yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in there. Those are all being worked on. But again, if anybody would like to debug any of them, feel free to grab them. An update to
this
go ahead.
part of this no match for this BB sim thingy found in the sanity check, the last one basically. It looks like relatively similar to some of the failures that we have in the hardware pipelines as well. Of like sometimes it just doesn't, or basically sometimes those devices seem to just not be there. I looked a bit through the code and was wondering if this is somehow of a regex or whatever issue where stuff is there but it's not being found. But okay, so I'll try to look at that ticket as well and see if this is the same thing that I've been seeing for the hardware parts, where it's also just sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I wonder if it's like an output and then regex issue, or, but yeah, I have to look a bit further through the parts.
Oh yeah, these are definitely transient failures. One other possibility too, devices may be slow to come back up, and they may not be ready when the test runs.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well. Yeah. Okay. So I'll see if that's the same thing. So that's like tickets. Yeah. I'll look at the thing.
Okay. Yeah. If you find anything related, could you just link to it in the comments?
I will. Yep. I will.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Generally, we've got a bunch of tests that are failing in the Jenkins dashboard. If you go into Jenkins, I've cleaned a bunch of them up, but usually the build queue is quite long here in the left margin. We've been going through and disabling some of the known failing pipelines, like the scale test hardware has been offline for a while, so we're just trying to temporarily turn those off. There's more to do, but we've got quite of them disabled now. Okay, so any questions about any of this? Okay. On to release. There are VOLTHA, or for the beta release, we now have branches and tags on almost all of the repositories. There's only 4 I still need to do. OpenOLT, Circont found that one had not been tagged yet. BBSim status server, VOLTHA docs, and pod configs. I'll be doing those this afternoon. Just an FYI, if you haven't run into this before, it's documented. The tagging and branching is documented on VOLTHAdocs.org. But just be aware if you're creating bug fixes later on, there's inconsistent tagging and branching used across the different repositories that we're releasing. So primarily for VOLTHA, we usually create a branch, and then from the branch, we create a tag for the repositories VOLTHA Helm charts and VOLTHA system tests. For all of the other repositories, we create a tag first and then create branches from that. And there's two permutations to be aware of in there. For the repositories that have Golang source in them, we use Golang versioning for the tags. So there's a letter V that prefixes the version string, v1.2.3. For the non-Golang repositories, we omit the V. It would be just tag 1.2.3. And well, for those repositories, we generally tag at a derivative of v2.12, which would be tag 2.12.0. We just suffix a 0 on it. For some of the other repositories that we don't have direct version control in, like the ONOS repositories, and you can look at any of the ones with a version file. For those repositories, we use the contents of the version file to create the tag from it. So if you're creating a bug fix, just be aware of the branch and the tag that you're working with. And there's just some random information in here. Here's what I just mentioned about the branches and the tags, both the Helm charts and system tests. Create a branch and then a tag. All the others are tagged and branch. Golang has a V prefix. Non-Golang omits the V. Generally, when we do the release, there's a Git review file in each of the repositories that when you do a rebase or merge, this is the target or the origin branch on the remote server. So when you're working in v2.12, you want to push to the 2.12 tag or branch, not the master branch, obviously. Surcount was being helpful, trying to create some just test the branches out, checking in some benign changes to make sure the tags and everything were in a good state. And later on, once the tests are cleaned up, again, we'll just go through and refresh the branch and the tag versions to do the final release. So if you're working in a repository, you can use this git log command, graph, decorate one line to find out what the branches and tags are. So I forget what repository for this was, but in this case, you can see the tag was 2.12.0 and the branch is origin VOLTHA 2.12. So that's what you'll be working from. Let me see, we still have to write up the release notes for 2.12. And for the release matrix, all the ONOS stuff is done. This is tracking the releases of the different repositories plus the beta branch creation. That's pretty far along. Anything in red those are some failing jobs that are being worked on and the associated patches. But that's all the stuff that's in for release right now. But the beta release branches and tags are pretty much in place right now if people want to start using them. So you should be able to continue working on the master branch now. And let me see, I guess, are there any questions about any of this? And if not, I guess we can open up the floor. If anybody has any other topics they'd like to discuss. Oops. Well, I guess the testing and status were the bulk items for this, and the OLTs were the bulk items for this week. Okay, I guess, does anybody else have anything you want to bring up or before we sign off? Oh, it looks like we can give you a few minutes back then. Okay. If there's nothing else, I guess thanks for joining this week. We'll see you again next week.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Thank you. Bye.